I really enjoy those books where a writer talks about their craft, especially when a novelist talk about the art of novel. Whether it's Salman Rushdie's essays on novels or Murakami's book called Novelist as a Vocation, or the one that I've got with me today, Milan Kundera's The Art of the Novel. I really enjoy these books where a novelist breaks down the process for you and explains what it means to write a novel, what kind of art it is, how it is conceived and created, and all the information coming from your favorite novelist. It's a cherry on top. And that's the reason I really loved this book called The Art of the Novel. So, what happens in the book? Well, obviously, the author Kundera reflects on what novels do, how they think, and why they matter. And he starts with the writers like Cervantes from the very early modern times, then goes on to talk about Kafka, even Tolstoy, but more importantly, he raises some of the big questions of human existence. And he does so by telling us the story of the novel. So the book is part literary history, part personal essays, but mostly it's a philosophical conversation about the art of the novel. And the essay that I'm going to discuss with you today is the first one, which is very much about Cervantes. As many of you would already know, Cervantes was the author of what is considered as probably the first novel in modern history. The novel was called Don Quixote, and it's a really brilliant one, really funny, and really enjoyable. Coming to this particular essay, the point that Kundera raises here is that the art of the novel is pretty much towards the end, because what has been a tradition of novel writing, it has come to an end. We are living in some kind of post-novel era, and he makes this case brilliantly. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to read certain passages from the essay, and you will understand it better what he's trying to say here. So without any delay, let me read those passages where he's making a case that the novel has already died. He says, "The death of the novel has been much discussed for a long time, notably by the futurists, by the surrealists, by nearly all the avant-gardes. They saw the novel dropping off the road of progress, yielding to a radically new future and an art bearing no resemblance to what had existed before. The novel was to be buried in the name of historical justice, like poverty, the ruling classes, obsolete cars, or top hats. But if Cervantes is the founder of the modern era, then the end of his legacy ought to signify more than a mere stage in the history of literary forms. It would herald the end of the modern era. That is why the blissful smile that accompanies those obituaries of the novel strikes me as frivolous. Frivolous because I have already seen and lived through the death of the novel. A violent death inflicted by bans, censorship, and ideological pressure. In the world where I spent much of my life and which is usually called totalitarian. At that time, it became utterly clear that the novel was mortal as the West of the modern era. But aren't there hundreds and thousands of novels published in huge editions and widely read in communist Russia? Certainly, but these novels add nothing to the conquest of being. They only confirm what has already been said. Furthermore, in confirming what everyone says and what everyone must say, they fulfill their purpose, their glory, their usefulness to that society. By discovering nothing, they fail to participate in the sequence of discoveries that for me constitutes the history of the novel. They place themselves outside the history. Or, if you like, they are novels that come after the history of the novel. About half a century ago, the history of the novel came to a halt in the empire of Russian communism. That is an event of huge importance given the greatness of the Russian novel from Gogol to Ballet. Thus, the death of the novel is not just a fanciful idea, it has already happened. And we now know how the novel dies. It's not that it disappears, its history stops. After that comes nothing but a period of repetition in which the novel keeps duplicating its form, emptied of its spirit. Its death occurs quietly, unnoticed, and no one is outraged. But hasn't the novel come to an end of the road by its own internal logic? Hasn't it already mined all its possibilities, all its knowledge, and all its forms? I've heard the history of the novel compared to a seam of coal long since exhausted. But isn't it more like a cemetery of missed opportunities, of unheard appeals? There are four appeals to which I'm especially responsive. First, the appeal of play. Laurence Sterne's Tristram Shandy and Denis Diderot's Jacques le Fatalist are for me the two greatest novelist works of the 18th century. Two novels conceived as grand games. They reach heights of playfulness, of lightness, never scaled before or since. Afterward, the novel got itself tied to the imperative of verisimilitude, to realistic settings, to chronological order. It abandoned the possibilities opened up by these two masterpieces, which could have led to different development of the novel. Second is the appeal of dream. The slumbering imagination of the 19th century was abruptly awakened by Franz Kafka, who achieved what the surrealists later called for, but never themselves really accomplished, the fusion of dream and reality. This enormous contribution is less the final step in a historical development than an unexpected opening that shows that the novel is a place where the imagination can explode as in a dream, and that the novel can break free of the seemingly inescapable imperative of verisimilitude. Third is the appeal of thought. Musil and Brock brought a sovereign and radiant intelligence to bear on the novel, not to transform the novel into philosophy, but to marshal around the story all the means that could illuminate man's being, could make of the novel the supreme intellectual synthesis. Is their achievement the completion of the novel's history, or is it instead the invitation to a long journey? And then the fourth is the appeal of time. The period of terminal paradoxes incites the novelist to broaden the time issue beyond the Proustian problem of personal memory to the enigma of collective time, the time of Europe. Europe looking back on its own past, weighing up its history like an old man seeing his whole life in a single moment. Whence the desire to overstep the temporal limits of an individual life to which the novel had hitherto been confined, and to insert in its space several historical periods. But I don't want to predict the future parts of the novel, which I cannot know. All I mean to say is this: if the novel should really disappear, it will do so not because it has exhausted its powers, but because it exists in a world grown alien to it. The unification of the planet's history, that humanist dream rather, which God has spitefully allowed to come true, has been accompanied by a process of dizzying reduction. True, the termites of reduction have always gnawed away at life. Even the greatest love ends up as a skeleton of feeble memories. But the character of modern society hideously exacerbates this curse. It reduces man's life to its social function, the history of a people to a small set of events that are themselves reduced to a tendentious interpretation. Social life is reduced to political struggle, and that in turn to the confrontation of just two great global powers. Man is caught in a veritable whirlpool of reduction where hustle's world of life is fatally obscured and being is forgotten. Now, if the novel's raison d'etre is to keep the world of life under a permanent light and to protect us from the forgetting of being, is it not more than ever necessary today that the novel should exist? Yes, so it seems to me. But, alas, the novel too is ravaged by the termites of reduction, which reduce not only the meaning of the world, but also the meaning of works of art. Like all of culture, the novel is more and more in the hands of the mass media. As agents of the unification of the planet's history, the media amplify and channel the reduction process. They distribute throughout the world the same simplifications and stereotypes easily acceptable by the greatest number, by everyone, by all mankind. And it doesn't much matter that different political interests appear in the various organs of the media. Behind these surface differences reigns a common spirit. You have only to glance at American or European political weeklies of the left or the right. They all have the same view of life, reflected in the same ordering of the table of contents, under the same headings, in the same journalistic phrasing, the same vocabulary, and the same style, in the same artistic tastes, and in the same ranking of things they deem important or insignificant. This common spirit of the mass media, camouflaged by political diversity, is the spirit of our time. And this spirit seems to me contrary to the spirit of the novel. The novel's spirit is the spirit of complexity. Every novel says to the reader, things are not as simple as you think. That is the novel's eternal truth. But it grows steadily harder to hear amid the din of easy, quick answers that come faster than the question and block it off. In the spirit of our time, it's either Anna or Karenin who is right, and the ancient wisdom of Cervantes telling us about the difficulty of knowing and the elusiveness of truth seems cumbersome and useless. The novel's spirit is the spirit of continuity. Each work is an answer to preceding ones. Each work contains all the previous experiences of the novel. But the spirit of our time is firmly focused on a present that is so expansive and profuse that it shoves off our horizon and reduces time to the present moment only. Within this system, the novel is no longer a work, but one current event among many, a gesture with no tomorrow. Now, does this mean that in a world grown alien to it, the novel will disappear, that it will leave Europe to founder in the forgetting of being, that nothing will be left but the endless babble of graphomaniacs, nothing but novels that come after the history of the novel? I don't know. I merely believe I know that the novel cannot live in peace with the spirit of our time. If it is to go on discovering the undiscovered, to go on progressing as novel, it can do so only against the progress of the world. The avant garde saw things differently. It was possessed by an ambition to be in harmony with the future. It is true, avant garde artists did create works that were courageous, difficult, provocative, ridiculed, but they did so in the conviction that the spirit of the time was with them and would soon prove them right. Once upon a time, I too thought that the future was the only competent judge of our works and actions. Later on, I understood that chasing after the future is the worst conformism of all, a craven flattery of the mighty. For the future is always mightier than the present. It will pass judgment on us, of course, and it will do so without any competence. But if the future is not a value for me, then to what am I attached? To God, country, the people, the individual? My answer is as ridiculous as it is sincere. I am attached to nothing but the depreciated legacy of Cervantes. And that's how this essay ends. As you can see, it talks about the death of the novel as an art form and how, even though you can see nowadays so many novels being published, it's merely a repetition. In this essay, he also mentions that through novels, we can discover certain things which can only be discovered through novels. There's no other way. So it's really an instrument, a unique one, to discover certain truths. But we have stopped doing that now. Now, with the mass media and today's culture, it's just that we are producing more and more novels, but the ideas are similar. It's merely a repetition of the same form. We are not creating more forms, we are not creating anything original. So that's the case he made in the essay, and you can see a lot of nostalgia for the novels that came in the 17th, 18th, 19th, or even 20th century. And to a large extent, I'm sure many of you would agree with him. When you consider these novels, their originality, their form, the style, you can just marvel at them. You have to appreciate the art in them. And thankfully, they are still there and we can read them. And I think, to be honest, there are so many of them we might not need more novels in future. There are already enough. Whichever emotions, whichever ideas that we want to explore through novels, through this particular art form of storytelling, I think there is already enough of repository that's already there, and we can and we should make use of it. So that was all about this first essay, and I will talk about the novel as an art form, which is the second essay in this book. I will talk about that in the next episode, and I hope if you get a chance to read the book, you will certainly enjoy it. And if you don't get to read this book, you should, and you definitely should, read Milan Kundera's books, his novels, because they are absolutely brilliant. I cannot recommend enough. So, with that, I'll take your leave and we'll continue to talk about the novel as an art form in the next episode as well. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.